Indigenization Appreciation Hour. With me is, of course, my associate, Sriram Tyagarajan. And I'm, of course, Saurav Jha. And we are going to be discussing some budgetary matters today, since we had that yesterday. The defense budget in particular, because that is sort of the purview that falls within the purview of this program, as it were. And the numbers, of course, are out there, and I'm sure some of you are already privy to the numbers. While at the headline level, the allocation has gone up by 9.53% for financial year 25-26. I'm of course talking about the budgetary estimate. With this, it has gone up by 9.53% with respect to the budgetary estimate of financial year 24-25. Right, and as and overall, it stands at around 13.45% of the total union budget for this coming financial year, that is 25-26. But the fact of the matter is that when you break that down, you will find that the heads that have sort of gained the least are the heads that we typically want to gain the most, right? And also because, see, as far as the capital outlay is concerned, the capital outlay for 25-26, financial year 25-26, that is, has been kept at around 1,80,000 crore, which is, of course, the and around 26.43% of the total allocation. Out of there, 23, that's around 26.43% of the total allocation. So there is always this talk of whether there is enough room for the capital outlay to grow or not, because it's already at usually between 25 and 33%. But that's a separate matter. The point is that the capital outlay has been kept at 1,80,000 crore, and this is no great increase from the capital outlay that was projected in for financial year 24-25 in the last budget, right? So it's just 4.65% higher than the budgetary estimate for financial year 24-25. Now, if more now, one good thing is that, of course, 75% of this is going to be 75% of this is going to be reserved out of the total capital outlay. 75% is basically going to be reserved for domestic spending let me just clarify that a little bit. Not all of it. 1,48,722.80 crores is going to be spent as the modernization budget of the armed forces. So out of that 180,000 crores, 1,48,722.80 crores is basically what is going to be reserved for modernizing the three services. The rest, which is around 31,277.20 crore, will of course be distributed between DRDO's capital budget and the creation of infrastructural assets across the country, right? So that is the breakup over there. Now, of that 1,48,072.80 crores, 75% of the same, that is 75% of that figure, is earmarked for domestic procurement through domestic sources only. So that is, of course, something which is a very it's a very good development, and it has happened in recent years. And only 25% is allocated for overseas purchases, basically. So with 75% of that having been earmarked, it means that there is only 27th, about let's say 27,886 crores left for spending on, no, more actually, more, not 27, but about, close to 40,000 crores that has been left for spending on procurement from elsewhere, that is through the global route, as it is called, basically imports. So if you look at that figure, it means that some of the imports that I would venture might actually see light of day in financial year 25-26 would then be the move to import Rafale Marine, 26 Rafale Marines, and of course the 3 Scorpion class submarines, right? The initial payments for that can definitely be made from around the remainder of the capital outlay. Remainder as in the amount of capital outlay that has not been earmarked for domestic purchases, right? So I think there is enough money for those things to go through. The good thing is, because 75% is earmarked for domestic purchases, this the whole issue of military inflation or the inflation in military industries is not going to impact us in the same way as it used to earlier. Because although this has not been assessed properly, but over the years it has typically been seen that military inflation, the inflation in military products overseas or especially in the West, typically runs much faster than that in India. Right. So now that most of it is earmarked for domestic procurement, the inflation adjusted sort of capital outlay is also not, is also not something to be scoffed at. Of course, there's another thing. There's a catch here. Even though it is earmarked for domestic procurement, it need not necessarily mean that the systems you're buying from domestic vendors are all IDDM projects, right? That they are designed, developed, and built in India. They might be under something like buy and make or buy and make one. Those other things that come under the defense acquisition procedure. So there's stuff earmarked for that as well. Especially, as you can know, there's obviously stuff earmarked for the C295 purchase in the domestic procurement capital budget, because the delivery will, while 16 are supposed to come from directly from Airbus Spain, 40 are to be integrated here, right? And for that, the delivery will be done by the domestic partner only. So there are those other, some of it will also go into those new kind of procurements, where something has been bought from somewhere and then indigenized. So it'll go into things like that as well. But overall, this is definitely a much better state of affairs than it used to be, say, 10 years ago, when there used to be only talk of this situation where that we need to move to a place where 75% of what we buy is going to be from domestic sources, whereas 25% will be imports. That is, now people are actually trying to actively implement that paradigm now, with caveats, obviously, like the ones I already sort of delineated. So, with keeping that in mind, I think we can go through some more budgetary numbers with Shriram before we get into the nitty gritty of how allocations work and how funds are dispersed, and how, if something is just earmarked somewhere, doesn't mean that it necessarily translates into something happening on the ground. So, Shriram, why don't you take over and just take us through some other numbers that you found interesting?
Sure. Somebody had a comment down below. Let me see who it was. Saregasa said it is okay. Yeah, I mean, everybody understands that when we're talking about budgets and funds and numbers, we will end up ranting. We'll try to keep it at a minimum today. So Saregasa says it is shameful that the Indian forces failed to spend 13,000 crores of capital outlay of the last budget, right? And let me put that into context. If you look at the page that I'm displaying right now, this is from the budget documents. You can look at the PDF file name. You can take a look at it at your own leisure from the Indian budget website. So what you see there is the numbers for research and development, right? So let me make that a bit clear. I think now that you can see the years, it's a bit clearer. So this is for 2023-24, the actuals, and this was budgeted, and then this was revised. So around 13 and something odd crores for the previous year. And this year's budget allocation is almost 15,000 crores. And the amount of money that the armed forces couldn't spend was very, very close to this number. I don't think I need to say anything more. Right? It would have the same amount of money if it had been diverted. Okay, yeah, assume that the entire amount cannot be absorbed by DRDO, DPSUs and the Indian industry to put into R&D programs. Say even 50% of it would have gone a long way. Just to satisfy our long-term infrastructure needs when it comes to R&D. I mean, we've both been saying this for a long time as to okay. We've both been saying this for a long time as to how much funding is required and how much infra is required to for all of these programs that we're doing, right? So when we talk about such huge numbers, we have a ready list of infrastructure needs that could have been set up with this money if it was actually available. I mean, understand, this is a government full of bureaucracy. It might not even have been the armed forces who were saying that they were unable to spend. The money might just not have been available and they were forced to let go of that money and couldn't spend on it. I'm sure Saurav has better understanding of how these things work on the inside. But for a layman's perspective, this is what happens, right? So you look at it, you see that so much money is not being spent, which has been allocated, right, in the budget. And then you have all of these places where you need to spend it on, and you've been waiting for years, where proposals have been gathering dust at MOD headquarters or PMS office, whoever is the ultimate decision maker for each of those proposals. Just to give you a small example, right? The heavy forge press that is needed for a lot of our aerospace programs, engine discs, aircraft bulkheads, landing gear for larger aircraft, all of these require 40, 50, 60,000 ton heavy forge press. And DRDO, HAL, they've all been asking to set one up. It takes a lot of money. It was proposed to cost around 750-800 crores about 6-7 years back. So you can imagine how much it will cost today. Assume, give it a round figure, say 1,000 crores. Right, so that is one solid chunk of infra, which is just one piece, right, which will take let's say 3-4 years to mature into being ready to deliver usable products. It's not just like your typical hammer forge where you thrust cast iron into the fire and then pull it out and hammer it on the anvil and then make a knife or sword out of it. Heavy forge, when it comes to aerospace flight critical components, take a lot of time to understand the process. It's not just taking something and hammering on it. Stress strain rates in the way the pressure is delivered to a hot piece of metal, fine-tuning the whole process to a particular product, and then having multiple products ready for induction. A turbine disc is as critical as they come. So it takes time to refine the process and get the best possible product out of it. Right. So even if you sanction the money today, it might be ready for serial production, say 4 years down the line, right? Best case scenario, when there's no war and nobody's pushing you. So just one facility like this costs 1,000 crores, and we're talking about 14,000 crores, and we know that we have a lot of investment proposals coming from fiber manufacturing. A lot of CVI, LSI reactors are required for carbon fiber, silicon carbide fiber production, and for research into it preliminarily, and later on when we go to serial production and all. That might be handed over to the private sector, but it is an area of continuous research, right? So it's not just that you create one product and then give it off to the user and then you forget about it perennially. So so the 14,000 crores, I'm sure we could have found at least about 28 programs to let's say spend it all within a couple of years easily. So why these things do not happen, I would ask Saurav to explain as to how easy or difficult it is to redirect allocated funds under one head into something else. I mean, personal finance is different, right? So if you get, say, 10,000 rupees today, you might end up buying something for your children, or something for yourself, or something for the house, or invest it somewhere. It's easy because you're the person holding the funds and you're the decision maker. Okay, I mean, if you're in a family, you have two, three people doing it. But how it works in a government setup with every bureaucracy having their own fiefdoms and procedures, all of that, I would ask sort of to
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah, sure. So Shyam, you raise a very pertinent point. So yeah, as you're going back to the analogy that you gave, we are not talking about personal finances here, right? So everything has to be a line item that has been pre-approved as part of your demand for grants, etc., and your whatever you put up to the finance ministry, and of course to the goes to the PMO as well. So the thing is that I'll give you an example. Say, let us take the AMCA. Okay, when the case for the AMCA was moved, and it obviously had to have the concurrence of the Ministry of Finance before it went to the Cabinet Committee of Security, DRDO would have had to go, and DRDO obviously would have had to go through, would have had to put up a detailed case as to why they're asking for XYZ 1,000 crores for the program, right? That's how it would have been. Then once it would have gone to the Ministry of Finance, they would have passed through it with a fine tooth comb to see whether this makes sense, and they would also have tallied it with their own projections for various ministries, right? For the heads they've got to see where this could fit in, and say they sanctioned. They also said that they approve, they are also in consonance with DRDO that XYZ 1,000 crores should be released for this, and they can. Then it will go to the Cabinet Committee of Security for approval. Once it is approved by the Cabinet Committee of Security with the full amount, or even they may say that, whether it should be this much or it should be something else. Suppose they approve all XYZ 1,000 crores. Now what DRDO will have to do is, in the subsequent demand for in the subsequent budgetary proposals that it sends to the MOF for annual budgetary proposals, it will have to start baking in the annual expense that it is likely to incur on this particular program, on the AMCA program. So say after sanction in the first, like in this budget, it was sanctioned in sometime in March, April 2024, right? It got CCS approval. Say in the budget for this year, 25-26, DRDO would have added this as a line item, and the CCS approval would be the apex level justification for them to have added this item, right? And they would say that this year for this head we need about 500 crores, say that the amount we are going to spend on the AMCA development project this year. I'm giving an example. These are all just examples. It could be the JMCA project also, for all you want. It's just an example. So suppose they've said that we want 500 crores for this year. They would then have that apex level justification where the Ministry of Finance, and that is CCS approval. There's concurrence at the highest levels for them wanting this, because this they would have also projected in the overall file that was approved by the CCS. They would have had to commit to a schedule in the CCS, in the file they would have sent to the CCS, and they would have had to say that I will spend so much on this year, that year, these are my projections, right? Now, usually, as the case is, DRDO's projections are not always off the mark because it's R&D. Not all. I mean, not all. Let me rephrase that. They're usually on the mark, okay, because they have more clarity about what they will need what they would need the next year, etc. And because there is apex level clearance for this project, this money is also sort of disbursed. It finds a place in the budget, in the in the expenditure budget of the government that we read, that is usually given at all's BE, all budget expenditure heads, right? So they have more clarity about their expenditure programming, and even the people who allocate the funds have more clarity about them. Now, when it comes to the unspent allocations year and year that we see with the with the services, it's obviously a matter of concern. It shows that they may not be doing their budgeting exercise in the most ideal manner. That is what really it comes to. It also shows that the procurement process itself needs an overhaul, so that whatever you had projected should come to pass. Otherwise, what is the point? It is so on the and what follows from this is, if you instead had an outlook where you would spend much more on R&D and you would develop things in India, you could actually minimize this shortfall that you face every year. I know there are some people who are going to scream bloody murder at this, that I'm talking about, a longer term exercise where you reallocate such funds to R&D. But within a year, it cannot be done because they have themselves sent their projections earlier, right? They had themselves sent their projections earlier with line items and long justifications, and they themselves have their DSE approved projects for procurement. So it's not so easy. It just means that the budgeting exercise and the procurement methodologies being used today need an overhaul as far as the services capital acquisition plans are concerned. Right, that is what it really means. R&D is doing probably better in that respect, because R&D in any case makes very tight projections. When I say R&D, I mean DRDO, obviously, Department of Defense Research and Development. So that is what we need to understand. And following from this, if anybody thinks that this has already been allocated and the engine has been sanctioned, they should not be under this illusion. That would have again required a special allocation, the case for which may have been moved. Okay, and in the case of the engine, it might not even have been just a DRDO file. It may have been a file moved concurrently by a number of entities for a national project, and that would have required a special allocation to be disbursed amongst various heads, with obviously DRDO being in the lead, because GTRE would be in the lead of any national engine development program. So, and a lot of people have this misconception that just because there is a head called, blow that up, that aero engines, there is a head for, under defense services, there is a head for aero engines, right? Isn't there? Just project that once, that same page on the capital outlay.
Yeah, it's usually a mix of new engines that are being bought for existing fighters.
For existing fighters and platforms. It is not.
We've had
it is in no way.
We've had two contracts being signed this year. One for the MiG-29 RD-33 engines, and one for the Su-30 MKIs, the AL-31 FP engines. Right. So those are usually included. Yeah, it's right here. One sec. Let me put it up.
So this has nothing. This in no way is. None of this is an allocation for a 5th generation engine development effort, as some people were unnecessarily talking about on social media. I think
4,008. That is 48,000 crores.
This is for recurring expenditures, recurring capital expenditures for existing assets and for new assets also, new aircraft, new engines. But this is not in any way an R&D.
The two contracts that we've signed, every year you have some allocation, because there is only a certain capability to absorb acquisitions each year. So even though you've signed the contract, the payment is done part-wise.
Obviously.
That's how it gets allocated also every year.
And so this is what that
Sorry, I jumped in.
This is in no way an allocation for any 5th gen. There is no allocation in this. No part of this is an allocation for any 5th generation engine development effort. That would have been if that had been sanctioned, it would have been a separate case for a national program with special allocation, also seen CCS approval, all that would have been there. So it's not really, and there would have been a budgetary announcement that would have led to a subsequent CCS approval process and all that.
There would be a lot more noise.
That is simply not there anywhere. You would have heard something similar to what was announced about the indigenous small modular reactor program. If that were indeed the case, it would have been a separate paragraph as part of the finance minister's speech, is what I would say, right? Is what I would imagine. So that is definitely not the case. That is definitely, so we'll have to wait for that. Maybe we'll see a CCS approval sometime this year, and then we'll see those budgetary allocations getting reflected in DRDO's budget for financial year 27-28, right? So that is how the process will unfold. And just the way it unfolded in the so-called AMCA example that I gave, the theoretical example that I gave. So it's usually you have to get, when it's a very big project involving many different entities, you have to get CCS approval, a defense project I'm saying, and then in the subsequent budgetary exercise, those things start showing up as justifications for demands. Right? That is how it goes for budgetary heads. That is how you go forward with these programs, not the other way around. And it'll be financed from within the DRDO budget, but they will have the justification for wanting a certain quantum of money with respect to that particular project once it has apex level approval. And so, what are the projects that typically require things like this? Actually, anything above 2,000 crores usually ends up going to the Ministry of Finance, and anything which is of the order of 10,000 crores requires CCS approval. Okay, this is true for that project Kusha to develop, new
Long range surface to air
long
missiles.
range surface to air missiles and interceptors. And it's true for the AMCA. It was true for the Tejas Mark II program, which is why people were saying why. And then people talk about why this is not happening and that is not happening. When things are not even sanctioned, what do you expect will happen? You see, internal
And
funds
to
are very
add,
tight for R&D.
yeah, and to add to
Yeah.
Saurav's point on the Tejas Mark II, you have to remember that even though the program was sanctioned, money was never released because the sanction was contingent on HAL and General Electric tying up the local production for the F414 engine, and that has still not been done, by the way. Right, so there's still talks going on. Apparently, they're somewhere close to being stalled for whatever reason. That we'll wait to see if somebody explains. But see, again, I think the case has been made that progress has to be made, and we can't keep perennially waiting for the engine deal to be signed. So some money has started coming in, but it has happened at least a year after the program was sanctioned. So just because the program is sanctioned doesn't mean that money is forthcoming. So the way things work in our system, it can be made to work faster if need be, or slow down as much as needed based on the current conditions around the program. Certain things get sanctioned very quickly, and you see that one day you hear about CC's sanction being accorded, in the very same evening MOD or one of the forces go around signing contracts. So there's no hard and fast rule on the procedure being followed to the T.
Yeah, well, no, well, to be honest, to be fair, procedures are followed to the T. It's just that the people are
Speed
not
at which.
yeah, people are not very conversant with the way the budgeting exercise works, basically, right? And R&D, unfortunately, for the longest time, has been at the receiving end of less than optimal budgets. We have to be clear about this. Even today, 14,000 plus crores or under 15,000 crores for the kind of things we need to do is not really any great sum. It has to be people, whether the entire system has to be much more ambitious, so to speak. Okay, in terms of what they want. And don't forget, some of that budget goes into something else. Some of it goes into DRDO support to the private sector, and only a certain amount is left for the bread and butter projects. That also we must take note of. It's not as if that entire 15,000 crores is left only for blue sky projects or something. There's chunks of it go away for various types of programs. There's no point getting into that, but be rest assured that only a certain proportion of that goes into tactical systems, if you like. If I were to use the word tactical systems, right, or other kinds of TD projects which will feed into the weapons of tomorrow, which will feed into the development of next generation weapons. So there's only a chunk left. So the answer is very clear. There have been numerous parliamentary standing committee reports which have said that we need to spend at least 10% of the defense budget on research and development, right? And we are still stuck in that 5 to 6% bracket. We need to now change the way we do things. And the revenue budget is also flattish. It's not just that the capital outlay budget is flattish. You see, DRDO also needs to recruit new talent. It's as simple as that, right? And that obviously will lead to an increase in revenue outlay over time. So we must keep in mind that we need a major expansion of not just the budget but of our vision itself. India needs to be much more ambitious as far as defense R&D is concerned. And the way to do it is not by saying we'll do this reform and that reform. If you try to reform in an environment where there are only a certain, where there is a limited quantum of funds, then you will not end up with any reform. You will end up with people getting deformed, basically, as they will fight with each other for those limited funds. That is not what you need. What you need is, you need to increase the allocation for defense R&D. And defense R&D is not a, just something that is used for national security. Defense R&D, as has been proven in the last 75 years of independence, has many second order effects and has the capability to increase the overall standing of your industrial enterprise, which it has done. There are people who used to make, I'll give an example. There are people who used to make washing machine clocks at one time in Hyderabad, right? In one of the industrial areas of Hyderabad. Today, they are integrating sites for anti-tank guided weapons, anti-tank guided missiles. And they are involved in a host of other projects. And they are now tier 1, tier 2 for civilian projects also in the aerospace sector. Not just defense. They supply a lot in both A and D, aerospace and defense. So obviously, where did they learn to? How did they get to this position? They got to this position by working on DRDO projects, especially the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program. Now, if today the situation is, of course, much better, the situation is such that there are many enterprises in India which are already tier 1 and tier 2 Safran, Rolls-Royce, and GE. They are supplying to global engine OEMs. It is now time to super energize that ecosystem, which has already got built up to an extent, with a 5th generation engine development program, which will concurrently raise the stakes for Indian industry, for the Indian manufacturing sector. And it will have to be R&D led, because we don't have a 5th generation engine with us at the moment. And there's no point just license producing engine, where the value capture will still stay mostly abroad, and especially the IP. So the ultimately what we are trying to say is the same thing again and again. You have to be much more we have to be much more ambitious as a country. We are not very ambitious when it comes to defense R&D or R&D per se. Everybody knows that our gross expenditure on research and development is stuck at the 0.65% mark for donkey's years now. Whereas, examples are given of South Korea and Israel. Even if I keep aside those examples, take the example of China. They are over 2% quite clearly. We should compare our benchmark ourselves at least with them, because these are two countries of comparable size, not of comparable economies. That's because they invested while we did not. Okay, let's be clear. And of course, they also got the foreign. They got much more, open markets as well on the world stage, which allowed them to sustain blistering growth for many years. All that is well known. But the point is, their vision is always one of ambition. They are an ambitious country. They are a country with a whole bunch of problems, and they are ultimately brittle politically, as evidenced by the number of people who keep disappearing over there. Right? I've lost count of the number of defense and foreign ministers who've disappeared in China. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point is that if we keep that aside, till the point where they collapse because of internal contradictions, they will continue to be a threat. And they will continue to be a threat for the simple reason, because they invest and they carry through, they invest on time. And we don't invest on time. We just keep talking about, no, what is the point? This is a long gestation thing. This is going to lead to this. Let's not allocate any money for this year. We have some other yojanas that need money. We have no clarity. Even those guys have not projected. No, let this go to CCS approval only next year. हाँ, अगले साल कर देंगे. इस साल तुम लोग छोड़ दो. ठीक है, this is
and that comes out of a vision for the country sometime in the future, right? So it's not just the funding, it's also about staying with programs and taking them to fruition, and then learning from it, inducting them in the hundreds and thousands, and then taking the lessons from it and going back to the drawing board and coming up with the next product. the whole product life cycle, right? Where you design, build, manufacture, and then go back to your next design. So in a lot of our programs, that has not happened. Only now, with a lot of orders for our missile programs, do we see the cycle happening. Which is why you see the missile cluster coming out with missiles for any given role in such quick time, right? So leave aside the really tough new ones like your Project Kusha or Scramjet and all, but tactical missiles, be it ADGMs or programs like the QRSAM, even the VSHORADs, it took 2 years for first test from the project beginning. So if you don't have the vision where you want your own product and you don't want to depend on anybody else, then you would come up with ways to finance these programs and get them through the whole design, testing, induction, manufacturing, refinement, block 1, block 2, block 3, and then the next next upgraded product. Without the will and the vision to do all of this, it's very easy to say, "Arey, ye sab karne ki kya zarurat hai?" Your Mark 1 might not be, might be 95% of whatever you can import today. If we buy it from XYZ country, they'll set up a local assembly line and they'll be friends with us. If we order it today, we'll get it tomorrow. This kind of thinking will not work. And I'm sure Saurav will explain it better. But given the current global scenario, everybody is out looking out for themselves. Everybody is trying to, let's start with the US, right? Everybody knows what Trump's stated economic policies are. To look out for America first, get back more jobs, be it people-wise or jobs-wise. They want to do more within the country. It's the same thing with Europe. And China has obviously got so much, industrial muscle built up, and we're trying to become something like they have done. So it is imperative that any technology, and today everything's got technology in it, right? So any technology, we should be trying to build it ourselves. To learn how to build stuff, right? We're predominantly an agrarian society even today. We have a little bit of industrial strength. To move people into more industrialization away from agri, you need people to understand how to think, how to build stuff, and go back and redo the whole process. Our education system is, well known, the pitfalls of it. Getting people to think on their own is a big ask. Getting them to enjoy the freedom where they can fail often, multiple times, and then go back and do it. Right? So whatever you start learning in school is what will carry over when you try to build products later on in life. It's the same thing with defense also. These things are critical, often cutting edge, and involve a lot of money, involve users. For civilian products, is not so much that you go and ask customers, you might do customer service. But for defense products, you have to involve the customer also, which is one of the armed services or maybe more than one. So you have multiple stakeholders, you need to learn how to work with groups of people and get products, on time, within budget. So all of these requires a lot of learning very early on, which is what a lot of startups are doing today, right? Which is why IDEX and Sprint have been such great successes. Anyway, coming back to the point, right? So unless you are willing to spend all of this money within the country, you will not develop all of these capabilities. You will not have young enterprising entrepreneurs coming up. If the government is not open-handed with money and saying, take this money, I am willing to forego it, but build me something world-class in quick time, that will give me an edge. So what happens is those people do not go out and build systems that will be used against you. And you're building your own ecosystem within the country, because somebody working with that guy will go on and set up another company building something else, which is how you develop an ecosystem. Correct. So if you keep spending that money outside, you're not providing any opportunity to the young budding entrepreneurs within your country who will have to look out for some other opportunity, some other field, or maybe some other country itself. And at the same time, you're funding the development of such an ecosystem in another country. Today he might be a friend, or maybe not even a friend, but tomorrow who says he'll be friendly towards you? Which is why China is succeeding. I mean, let's not call them on par with the US, but they're still taking the effort to do all of this by funding infrastructure development, large wind tunnels, a lot of funding for their universities. Just look at the endowment for Tsinghua University and all of their NUDT. The amount of academic output from all of these universities is staggering, right? So, and all of this is in the backdrop of insane amount of funding from the Chinese government, and not just funding, right? It's not just that they allocate funds and then forget about it. There's a lot of drive coming right from the top, from the CMC, the Chinese Military Commission, which is right now staffed by a lot of technologists and engineers and all of these R&D kind of people. So there is drive right from the top, with not just funding but also a desire to run all of these programs and get on par with the US. A clear, defined goal for them. I'm not saying we should go out and try to conquer the world, but at least try to safeguard ourselves.
Yeah, we have to. And see, the point is very simple. What you said, for the longest time post liberalization, the talk was we move directly from being an agrarian economy to one being high tech services economy. Now, great, competitive advantages have been built in certain offshore outsourced services and all that, and that is serving us well. And we are being able to move into new paradigms as well. But the point is, we graduate 700,000 engineers. What the hell is that for? If we are not going to build a proper industrial estate and a manufacturing estate, what did the British do to us? As you were mentioning, that is what the British did to us. They deindustrialized Gangetic Bengal and Bihar and Eastern UP, right? And they made sure that a whole classes and castes of people who had hereditary knowledge in making things, in doing things. India was a pioneer in various industries through time, whether it be wood, steel, or whether it be the various dyes,
investment casting,
investment casting, the great investment casting that is the a very key component of jet engine production today, or it be the creation of machines for obviously non-powered machines for textiles. India was a world leader in all of these key areas, right? And this meant that whole classes and castes of people in India were at the peak of industrial knowledge in their time. And the British destroyed all these industries and turned them into landless labor. Right. So this is what we have to overcome, which is why we need an industrial expansion. Industrial expansion, people talk about we made a mistake, we invested in heavy industries. No, the heavy industries are always required to protect your country. Anybody who starts a program of industrialization always keeps in mind the need to also protect the realm, as it were, right? So this is something we must not forget. Many of the problems that we see today stem directly from deindustrialization, which was the biggest blow given to Indian society. This we must not forget. So we need to reindustrialize. There's no doubt about that. We are graduating so many science and technology and engineering and mathematics, individuals every year. They may be of uneven quality. All of them may not be the greatest that you have there, but the sheer numbers are so high. You need to absorb them in something worthwhile, and not just turn them into coolies for the global technology imperium of the West. See, what has happened is America has managed to inflict upon us a new colonization, where they are the center. They will do the R&D, and you will only do the application oriented work for them on the cheap. And some great luminaries of the Indian IT sector keep espousing this paradigm, basically, when they say that we should make something like not work on foundation models, not work on large language models, so on and so forth. And always the same excuse is given. Oh, the entry barrier for R&D is very high. Let the big guns invest. Actually, it's not so high anymore. It can be done frugally, and India has done it also in the past. The amount of money spent on the integrated guided missile development program, for instance, was nothing compared to the money that some people are spending. But still, we have seen the results over time. Same with the nuclear program in various domains. And this can be replicated in AI also, as is being proved in other places. It should have been proved in India. But the point is that nobody in India was being allowed to do anything really by these by the by the IT ecosystem here, who are very afraid of probably upsetting the apple cart for their existing businesses, which is why you don't see that many products come out of India either. Can India not develop IT products? Of course it can, better than Russia or China certainly. But that is not the model, you see. But in the case of weapons, this thing just cannot fly. This thing of license production and import cannot fly anymore. People will now have to do right by the people of India. The way in which the way in which we can prevent this society from becoming more lopsided is by embracing industrialization. And industrialization cannot requires for industrialization to be done properly. Investment in R&D is sine qua non. It's as simple as that. What is the big difference between the Chinese and the Russians and us? I'll include the Soviets also here. Whenever anything came from anywhere in the form of FDI or some collaboration or anything, they would set up an industrial R&D institute in that industrial area, which would train and have people work on whatever machines have come in, whatever processes have come in, etc. Because they saw advanced industrial processes as an advanced science, in itself. They studied it, they worked on it, they launched pilot projects, they let those fail. This was done in the Soviet Union also and in China. And in China, it was turbocharged because they were given, because they were integrated into the Western economy, which the Soviet Union never was properly. That's in fact what is being done to China now was done to the Soviet Union for a large part of 40 years, right? Which is why they could never get the scale they needed and the kind of industrial estate they wanted. But China could. So what have we seen in China? Something came from somewhere. After a few years, or at least, or maybe 10 years at most, 2 or 3 Chinese homegrown companies will come up selling basically the same product. Okay, and then iterating on it also. And slowly what would happen, they would become contract manufacturers for the bigger brand. And then they would then become competitors later. There are these.
And the Chinese have done this industrial policy thing to a great extent. Take the medical devices sector, for instance, and what they've done is, for all domestic procurement, for state procurement, right? So state hospitals and clinics and everything, they after they had their own companies license manufacturing Western medical products and getting to a stage where they can create knockoffs of these products, right? Then they mandated that all state procurement for their own hospitals and clinics and medical facilities, they would buy only from Chinese vendors, not from any of the Western vendors, right? So all of the medical devices that India is talking about today, so say dental equipment, X-ray machines, MRI machines, dentist chairs, even the surgical instruments and monitors and stents and anything, any medical related device or instrument or any other such thing that you've heard in your family circles, right? I'm sure we've all had some uncle or auntie or grandparent who's undergone some sort of surgery and they've used some medical term, right? All of those things, the Chinese have mandated that they will procure only from Chinese vendors. And the state is obviously a big buyer. So what happens is that entire money stays within the country. And this is not a guarantee that all these vendors will become better and they will supply better products and they will beat the Western the competitors. But you have to give them this chance, right? To learn and become better. And the other thing is, the Chinese government is very big on giving them subsidies and help to export out into all of these OECD countries and outcompete the existing established Western product makers. So it's not like the license Raj in India, where all of our companies used to sell only within, right? And they had no push or incentive or threat of having to export outside and competing against world class products. That is where the Chinese system is different. But in certain cases, like 3D printers, for instance, they are second class. And even in India, where price is a major factor, the Chinese 3D printers and similar products are not opted for because they're not at the level that people have gotten used to with Western products. Right. So this kind of an environment is absolutely necessary to grow your own products. And not just that, it is a great driver for jobs creation. When people ask what will all of these people do who you want to pull out of agri, they need to get into such things. Otherwise, you will never progress. The percentage of population doing agriculture in any of these other countries is very tiny. Ours is predominantly subsistence farming. So we have to get out of all of this. Anyway, should we jump into something else? We've been ranting for a long time.
No, but I'll just say one thing. Okay,
Yeah, sure.
their protectionism has been much smarter. The way we did protectionism was wrong. Okay, you cannot have an import substitution paradigm only. If you want import substitution, it should be clubbed with an open FDI policy. Otherwise, it becomes a double whammy. It impacts your balance of payments ultimately, and that is where the problem lies. The problem doesn't lie in being able to increase productivity in your economy. That import substitution can also do for a while, but it just stagnates you and impacts your balance of payments because you keep importing machinery to import substitute final products, right? And at the same time, you don't export anything. So your import bill always runs alongside, your requirement for fuel and other minerals runs pretty high, whereas you don't do anything on the external sector to even that out. So it's not a great, and then you don't allow things to attain scale within your economy through license, quota, permit, Raj, and all that, because you want to safeguard sectors, this, that, prevent competition, over competition, so to speak. So all these problems flow back into how you messed up that period basically when you were supposed to do import substitution in a much smarter way, as Japan did, and as China did, and as South Korea did, and Taiwan did. These guys were all import substitutors also. It's not like they only did export promotion. They did both because both go hand in hand. And in the case of China especially, they've learned from Japan. Japan set up the Ministry of MITI, basically the Ministry of Industrial, you know, Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. Right. This or rather in the early days, it used to be called Ministry of International Trade and Industry. Now, when Japan went through the lost decades and the Washington Consensus was in vogue, say around 99 2000, there used to be papers that used to denounce MITI. But actually, MITI played a seminal role in the industrialization of Japan and the technological rise of Japan. And of course, MITI was also involved in espionage, which is a different matter. But the point is that, like you said, it's not just about allocating money. You need to have a committed, technologically oriented bureaucracy that sits and passes through things line by line to see how they are being implemented, especially for core national projects. Something like the AMCA should have weekly oversight on it to find out what is going on. Okay, we've given you the money. You guys wanted the money to develop this. You put up a good proposal. We've given you the money, but we are going to monitor you on a very fine, on a very fine basis. We are going to monitor you to see how it goes. See, people don't seem to understand our perspective too well. We are not here to be apologists for anybody. We are saying give R&D the money it wants and then sit on its head to deliver results. As simple as that. That is our paradigm. It should not be, oh, you take 5 rupees. Oh, your project is in TD mode. Let it be in TD mode. Oh, you didn't manage to do it. Let me then project a case for something else and import this from there. That import also doesn't happen because of the way the procurement process unfolds. And then 20 years later, somebody runs and says, but why was this thing not developed indigenously? Were you really committed to making it happen? Or was it just a case of, endless rounds of prevarication on how we may or may not go about it. It comes down to the same thing. It comes down to how ambitious you are as a country. If you're ambitious as a country, if you are a country that wants to be a great power, then you will act accordingly. Otherwise, you will be in the ringa roses mode, where blame will be shifted from one set of people who have a government job to another set of people who have a government job. Okay, and all of them have government jobs at the end of the day. This is how it will be, and it won't matter who says what. All jobs are protected by the constitution anyway.
Great
Okay.
example of the process that you just talked about is the MTA program. Right? Nearly 20 years later, today, we're back to the IAF putting out an RFI saying they want a medium transport aircraft. And they're looking at everything from a C-130 all the way to the A400. Right? With the C-390 in between. So, if we'd taken a leaf out of Embraer and funded our own program and got it, some sort of collaboration or help from Airbus or anybody, by now we would have had something that is going into IOC. Right, no matter how suboptimal it might have been, even if we had to import engines for it from somewhere and have a domestic engine assembly line or something, but we would have had something. A great example is the Y20 that the Chinese have built in the hundreds. And the timeline was very similar. And they built something that is bigger, C-17 class. We should have done it, but we've not done it. Yeah.
Okay,
that is the way things happen.
Let's take this question. Rishabh says, my last DDR IH session question, please answer. Why don't we see any orders for Akash NG? Has it hit any roadblock? More tests being done by DRDO still. Developmental trials still. Range is 30 kilometers. Akash NG is on track. Yes, it's still in developmental trials, which will be concluded soon, I think. It's a system with very unique characteristics, let's put it that way, meant to prosecute a certain class of target. So, but I don't think it's in any kind of developmental hell or anything. I think we'll see forward movement on it. And personally, I would say that you might see orders for it much before 2030, a few years before 2030 itself. It'll go into production.
The orders are expected very soon, in the next couple of years. If you look at financial conference calls from Bharat Dynamics, you would notice that there are mentions of the Akash NG program penciled in for 2 years down the line.
Yeah.
Right. So it will happen contingent on the program going through the user trials successfully. Invariably, invariably these programs, right, they run through trials where the users comes in during the user trial phase and says, I want this thing to be done this way, can you tweak it, right? So it goes back and it adds a little time. So I wouldn't say it's delayed, I would say it's probably normal progression. And let's take one couple of questions, right, and then we can wrap it up. First question is, how do we dodge the Trump uncle who wants us to buy more military hardware? I think our guys have to just sit with them and list out all of the things that we've bought in the last 10 years. Apaches, Chinooks, C-130s, C-17s before that, Apaches for the Army and Air Force, MQ-9Bs, P-8Is. I don't think there's anything more that we can buy from them. So I think we should sit down. F414 engines, right? 100 of those we are going to sign if things progress. So we have to sit and make a strong case that we are already buying as much as we can, and we also want to make things ourselves, just like how Trump wants to build stuff on his own. Right, so, and maybe give him concessions somewhere else. I'm sure we have a lot of things that we need that we can buy from the US and make things better with them.
But that is just the point. If you look at things that have been reported in the press, there are people who think that the one thing we can actually buy from them is weapons, right?
Exactly.
And that is the whole point. But that will militate against our goal of indigenization. right?
Correct.
That
Nitesh,
militates against the goal
yeah,
of indigenization.
correct. Nitesh, thank you again for your contribution. Would Kestrel have any chance when diplomatic autonomy geniuses are done with the striker deal? It's the same thing, right? We should put up a strong case with the Americans and tell them we've already bought so boatloads of military hardware from you. We will buy something else. I'm sure we have a lot of industrial machinery that we need, right? That we can buy from the Americans. Maybe even give a couple of concessions in the dairy industry. Let them import some cheese and wine and stuff like that. I'm sure we have a huge market for California wines. If they're struggling with forest fires and all, I'm sure we can drink a little wine and help them out. One more question from Rishabh. Why some media and even DRDO says 30-kilometer range only for a dual pulse missile? Is it true that it is being developed to complement orders for MRSAM? Let's take DRDO specs with a lot of, let's say, let's not take it at face value. Sometimes they're understated. Sometimes the specs from imported systems are overstated. It is a on the move surface to air missile. So, and being surface to air missile, the ranges are lower compared to something that is air launched. As to why it is not the same as the MRSAM, if you take a look at the specs, I'm sure a few things will be clarified. It doesn't differ much. Okay, we'll take one last question before we wrap up. What is your take on the critical minerals mission? I think it is way past due. Should have been done a long time back, but at least it's good that we've done it now. This is something that Ashwini Vaishnav showed the other day. So these are the 24 critical minerals that India is going to focus on. Critical minerals are not exactly rare, but they're important for across industries, right? So it's a question of survey, figuring out where deposits are, and then figuring out a way to extract them and get them to a usable state where it is ready for any heavy industry to use it. So all of these mineral beneficiation, all of those are very technological and power intensive and money intensive, obviously, when it comes to mining and ore purification and processing, and then making products out of all of these minerals, right? And having products to use these products that are derived from these minerals. Let's say a drone, right? A drone uses copper, a lot of precious metals, gold and selenium, gallium, for instance. So just looking at these 24 numbers, you see at least 4 or 5 that are used, even graphite going forward. You see a lot of these minerals being used in something as simple as a mobile phone or a drone, right? So that is your end product, but it comes from a mine somewhere else. So getting from the ore to the product is critical, and having the technological capability and the industrial capability to get from the ore to the product is important. Right now, I'm sure you've all heard, right? We export a lot of iron ore, and monazite sands are banned. But again, the Japanese want us to sell them ores in return for them selling us permanent magnets. Right, so it should be the other way around. If we have the ore, we should be the ones selling magnets to everybody else. It's a long and
it's
detailed topic that we'll do separately in an IH session.
It requires a different IAH, but be
Yeah.
rest assured that all the things listed there are at the 4-digit HS level. Okay, we need to be able to work with things at the 6. We need to have capability to fabricate things at the 6 and 8-digit levels based on that. Basically, intermediates and other usables. Those are just it's just a listing of the minerals themselves. Anyway, so 1 second. Let me just take a couple of more questions here, and then we'll have to wrap it. Akshay
Sure.
here asked, why don't we have something akin to the Naval Design Bureau? As far as I guess, as far as the Army and AF are concerned, they want everything to perform in a vacuum. Well, they certainly should have had by now their own kind of AFRL and ARL, as in America. This would also have taken the burden of DRDO to a great extent, because DRDO in India is currently an AFRL, Office of Naval Research, IRPA, DARPA, and Army Research Laboratory rolled into one, as things stand right now. So it would have actually been good had they, created their own kind of design setup, in-house design setup here, and it would have probably reduced some of the friction also that we have seen over the years. So that is a pertinent point. And then I guess somebody is asking,
driving programs from
yeah.
the armed forces themselves with a clear cut ability to see what is possible and what is needed in a product is important, because ultimately the user is the one who's going to use it.
Yeah, but if you don't do a learning by doing cannot be emphasized enough. You have to, even as a military service, you have to have a R&D practice. Then you will understand the very real issues that you will face in developing new weapon systems, right? And that would
Realism.
Yeah, and that realism in turn would reflect itself in the kind of SQRs you set for the R&D agency, and in the kind of messages that you can communicate to the R&D agency. Ultimately, it cannot be that ringer roses system or passing the parcel. Somebody has to own the program, right? And that owning the program and taking responsibility for it is something that that Indian society in general balks at sometimes. At least that is my view on such matters. People need to take responsibility for what they are trying to do, right? Somebody is telling us that the DDR website has been hacked and we should take responsibility for its security. So we'll fix that as soon as we can. Of course, we if such attacks are not always cannot always be fended off, because it depends.
Yeah, we've been putting up with it from the first day the website went live.
Yeah, because of the simple reason that we face up to 10,000 attacks a day on our website, and of all varieties, DDoS, etc., so on and so forth. But anyway, I guess not everybody likes to hear about indigenization. So
yeah, we've learned that personally and through other means.
Through other reasons, for whatever other reasons. Anyway, with that in mind, we are definitely going to take a look at what is happening to our website right now. Thank you for letting us know. If anybody thought that we ranted a bit much today and were a little too loud, I guess you can forgive us, because the occasion perhaps called for it. We will go back to our more somber way of presenting things from the next episode, perhaps. All right. And
one last comment is about Aero India. Yeah. I will be there with a couple of friends from DDR, and we'll look at who is willing to talk to us and share information. I mean, as usual, the aircraft programs and many subsystems was the plan. If you have anything specific that you would like to learn about, just ping us on Twitter, and we'd be glad to add it to a list, and we'll try to get you answers for those. We'll be there the first 3 days. So if you spot us anywhere, spot me anywhere, just come say hi. We'll be glad to meet people in person.
Yeah, and for our members and for some of our old members like Arjun Kapoor, we will have a members only IH as well, where we can discuss certain things, right? So that is also on the cards. Having said that, I think we'll have to wrap up this evening's show. Thank you for tuning in. Happy Saraswati Puja to all of you. Happy Basant Panchami. And in general, I would again say there is no alternative. There is no alternative to learning by doing. So we must stay the course as a country on defense R&D, on defense industrialization, on industrialization in general. With that, let me just conclude this evening show. Jai Hind.
Bye-bye.